All right, everyone. My name is Buck. I'm the founder of Humn Capital. We are a hotel development and consulting firm. What that means is we concept, create, design, develop boutique hotels. We also offer services primarily to other real estate developers. Today, I'm going to give an inside look at the business. I'm calling it the state of the human or state of Humn Capital. The reason I'm doing this, I recently brought on some new team members, and in bringing them on and getting them up to speed, I realized just how much is on my mind and how valuable it would be for me to get it off my mind and out there, something that I could go back and look at to kind of track the progress. I've been at this for almost 3 years now. And the other part is how valuable it would be for other people. As I've gone and tried to build this up, obviously I've retained a lot of information and lessons and learnings along the way that I'm going to try to get out for my own sanity and for the sake of others. So today I'm really giving the inside look at our business, at my business. We have two main parts of the business, hotels and consulting. I'll go through each hotel project and explain the consulting business and where that's at. There's some tech components to it that I'm currently developing, so there's a true sort of updates to give there, and then also talk about the team, how it's changed in recent months, had to let some people go, bringing on new people, and how I'm approaching that from both a financing standpoint, but also culture and just skills and what I'm trying to build out, what I think I need, how I'm going about it. I'll start with the hotels. So under hotels, the primary project is Oxido Sedona. I call it the primary because Humn Capital really started after I left a job that I was working in finance in New York. And this concept that has now become Oxido Sedona, that was what I started working on as soon as I left my job. And when I left my job, I started doing freelance financial modeling and pitch decks for other real estate developers, private equity, and venture capital. I ended up pitching that concept to one of the venture capital firms I was working with, and that started Oxido Sedona. That started the process of getting us to where we are today. I've been driving the project since then. It's my concept, my vision. The other projects I'll get to are different. So that's why I call Oxido the primary. It's my main focus. Where that is at, I won't get into the whole backstory because I've talked about it elsewhere and I'll make a video on here. But essentially, about a year and a half ago, I brought on a family office from Arizona to secure the land. It was about $1.7 million, so we had to raise that funding. And the way we structured it was they are land people, they are land developers, that's their specialty. So they secured the land, acquired the land, and we are essentially forming a partnership, and their contribution to that partnership will be the land asset at the value of the land. Since the beginning of this year, we have been working to try to finalize and formalize that partnership. Into the end of last year, we were working on architecture, engineering, concept, everything. And the plan was to go out and raise the rest of the money needed to construct the project. But once we got to the beginning of this year, some changes in the team dynamic, a couple of other partners left. It really threw things up in the air, and there's had to be a lot of work to figure out how the dust settles. And that's now coming up on an 8-month process. The reason things like this take 8 months, I'm learning, can sometimes be as simple as just response times and bandwidth of one side or the other. And if people have other projects going on, these things move really slow. There's lawyers, there's red lines and redrafting documents, and then there's the actual just negotiations and going back and forth. We have a set of operating documents that are done. We just got the last kind of turn of terms back from the family office to get into this document set, and we are working on finalizing that and coming to an agreement that would allow us then to really launch the capital raise on the remaining capital needed to construct the project. Because of all this, there's not much day-to-day that even can be done on the project itself. Everything, architecture, design, we have 6 to 8 months ahead of us in order to finish that up. All of that will not be, we can't even start that until we have this next tranche of funding. So I expect that to be finalized within a month. I expect the docs actually to be finalized within 2 weeks, and then I expect 2 to 4 weeks after that to raise. We're essentially raising an initial amount, a smaller amount, to get architecture started again. And then we will continue to raise to get to the total amount to start the construction sometime in early to mid next year. My biggest lesson on this project has just been patience. Truthfully, I started working on this in February of 2021. It's now August of 2023, so about 2.5 years to be exact. And not all real estate projects go this way. Ground up projects tend to skew longer in this direction, but this has all been just getting to the starting line, right? We haven't even finished architecture. So I will say a lot of it is just interpersonal. That would probably make up the majority of the time that has gone on versus, permitting or anything else, which I'll get to with these other projects. Hotel Perle. So Oxido, I expect docs to be finalized in 2 weeks, and then maybe a month or 6 weeks from now to have that first tranche of funding in, and then we're rolling again. We'll release the architect, or not release them, but basically engage them again for the construction document set. We'll kind of finalize design there. We'll take engineering through over that time period, call it 6 to 8 months, and we will find our contractor and start getting everything set to begin construction next year. Hotel Perle, this is second on the list. This project is a hotel here in New Orleans where I am right now. It is the renovation of what was recently an office building into a unique boutique hotel concept, and the concept for this is a hotel for groups. So every hotel room is not a single room with a bathroom. It's 3 to 5 bedrooms with a living room and kitchen. Similar to like condo or apartment hotels, people who come in master lease apartments and just kind of run it like a hotel, like Sonder, but very, very different because everything else outside the kind of makeup of each of the rooms, which resembles an apartment or condo, everything else is truly a boutique hotel. So lobby, common spaces, bar and restaurant, pool bar, outdoor bar, design, branding, operations, everything is boutique hotel. And we are just bringing from Airbnb this group stay concept. The thesis behind it is that Airbnb introduced and really popularized this option to book together and stay together. Airbnb supply has gone down because of regulation. Quality has gone down over time. The experience, there's a lot of cons to it. Location is often not ideal, especially in cities like New Orleans where you don't have a lot of condo supply and a lot of large format units then are on the outskirts of kind of the urban core. What this allows us to do is take care and address a lot of the cons of Airbnb, bring the location into one of the best locations in the city, and kind of combine that Airbnb model with the best of what boutique hotels offer. That project, we completed demo, so the building is currently gutted and demolished on the inside, and essentially we are working through a few things. We are going through the VE or value engineering process with our interior designers to try to get costs down, with our engineers to change some structural and mechanical components to try to get costs down. Essentially, we've gotten our budget back. Over the period that we were doing demolition, we got our budget back, and now we have to address those cost concerns before we can start this next step, because it is above our planned budget and we are inching it back down and then hopefully below as well. My role on this project, in the very beginning, essentially I brought together the venture capital firm that helped me get Oxido started and a local New Orleans real estate developer that I worked with when I was in college for a couple of years. I knew them very well. When I started with them, they were a very small partnership. They've since grown. I stayed in touch with them. We were working on this project back when I was with them in school years and years ago. They kept the building under contract, and at a certain point in 2021, when they were about to lose it, we got connected, everyone came together, and kind of at the 11th hour, we got a deal done, a partnership. The venture capital firm, the local New Orleans developer, and then me getting a seat at the table. And over the time since, let's call it fall of 2021, coming up on 2 years, a lot of that has been architecture, interior design, concept, and branding. Initially, my role, Human Capital's role, was not going to be substantial, but about 6 months into the project, we were trying to just get like the initial vision, not architectural drawings or interior design plans, but just the concept. And we were trying out a bunch of design firms and architects and getting submittals, and none of them were really hitting. I put together a concept book, really a collection of mood boards and color palettes and thoughts I had on the direction for the hotel. I did a study of New Orleans and of comparable hotels and put that together. Off of that, I took a role really as creative director, which was a fee role separate from my promote and equity in the project. And that process carried through the architecture and design phase. The other thing I led on Hotel Perle was underwriting, so market research data, financial modeling, and then the capital raise, both the pitch deck and just the general facilitation of it. That was more falls under the partner responsibilities. The creative director we would have hired separately, so that was why it was kind of like a separate add-on contract that came later. As of today, I'm still involved on creative, less so than prior, just because a lot of that work is done. Obviously, financial modeling and capital raising is done. We closed the raise a couple months ago. So now the New Orleans local developer is primarily leading project management in the same way I'm leading that on Oxido. I am still, Human Capital is still involved, still at every table, at every discussion as we push forward, but that's why Oxido, I said, is more of the primary project. And I expect probably beginning construction again in about a month. And this one will be done, delivered, opened around this time next year. The last thing I'll say on Hotel Perle, as I look ahead, there is additional work needed to kind of bring this project together. And one of the tough things, such as coordinating the rest of the branding, development, and finalization, just coordinating through delivery, marketing, working with the operations, just bringing everything together. And that is a difficult, what's tricky about that is the role of a general partner. It's not necessarily to do that work, right? Similar to how it wasn't the role of the general partner, me or anyone else to be the creative director. That's something that you often hire out. So there is a role needed going forward. And I have a tough time devoting human capital's resources to that effort unless there is like the creative director role, which was about a year-long contract, unless there is a similar contract. This ties into everything I'm talking about here, but just bandwidth, and in order to commit resources to a project like that, needing to get some sort of return out of that. Moving forward, we'll put that into context a little bit. The Boulders, this is a project also in Arizona, essentially the family office that I pitched to bring into Oxido. When I pitched them, they said, this concept's great. If you find a piece of land, we'll fund it. That's what they ended up doing. Also, can you come do this concept on our land? So they had a piece of land that they were about to launch glamping tents on, essentially. My concept has changed since the time when I pitched them on Sedona. But at that time, what it was really like a tiny house, nature, retreat, community, village, whatever you want to call it. It was not as developed and built out as it is today, but that generally was the idea. What they saw in that was just more permanent structures than glamping tents. Glamping tents, especially in a desert environment, pose a lot of challenges, namely heat and just the conditions, sand, dust, wind. So that was what drew them to that, and I really took a role. The contract is essentially like project manager, but it's just quarterback in my eyes. So that's concept, creative, interior design, branding, everything, project management. It's been really rewarding, something I really enjoy. I don't have equity in this project. It's just a cash fee for those services, but I obviously treat it like it's my own. That project right now is stuck with the county, coming up on a year stuck with the county. We've gone back and forth with the county for review and comments, and then revisions on basically the plan set. So the engineering plans, architectural plans, etc. What's taking so long, the county that it's in is small. It's not that developed, so the staff in general is small, and apparently these types of municipalities are having difficulty attracting and retaining talent. So really it's a big bandwidth issue for them, and it's taught me a lot about just going through that process and how little sometimes you can control. So it's been a big waiting game for that. We've been able to use that time though to make improvements to the plans, namely changing the units. Initially we had planned on doing modular units, so units that are built in a factory and shipped down, and there's really now a robust market for that. It's not like the manufactured homes, Clayton homes, or things you might see on the side of the highway. They're really nice. They can be very nice, luxury, custom. We were always planning on doing that. It would help us handle the constructability and construction challenge of really just being so far out in the desert. This is an hour and a half out of Phoenix, probably 30, 45 minutes from the closest town. We, over this pause period, we kind of reevaluated as modular costs actually went up and surpassed the build on site costs as we were predicting them. And then looking at modular has a lot of constraints. For example, you can't build wider than 14 feet, or you have to ship it as an oversized load, which you might have seen on the highway before, which adds cost and complexity. 14 feet, we designed to that originally, but it was kind of constrictive. After reevaluating, we've opted to build on site and take advantage of the freedom in design and layout that we can have with that method. So we did a redesign of the units. We are working on finishing that now. That's going to be another county submittal process, but the process that's taking so long right now is really the site plan approval and rezone. The building permits should be much quicker, and something that we hope to get in soon so they can kind of both finish together and we can start construction in the new year. My role will continue to be project management, concept, brand design, everything else, all the way through delivery. And there's still some branding and design work left to do. My primary role over the last year has really been coordinating with the architect, going back and forth on drawings and plans and just dialing it in. The way I do this often is either mood boards and precedent photos, or really what I like to do is get on a program like Figma and just start kind of creating my own plans and drawings with shapes and lines and other things. And this has been a really powerful tool to help me kind of get my vision implemented in a way that's much more effective than just trying to describe it on a call or in an email or something. So those are the 3 hotel projects, and I hope that starts to contextualize why, like on Hotel Perle, I have to be very decisive about where I put my efforts because there's a lot going on, and that leads into the new opportunities as well. I told myself I wouldn't even think about the next property until Oxido was like 25 to 50% into construction, really at a point where I felt the general contractor and the architect had momentum and had control and were able, there was a clear line of sight to delivery. That still is the case, but things are starting to kind of spin up, things that will likely take a lot of time like Oxido. So I'm trying to gauge where to put my efforts kind of in preparation for that next effort that comes at that point with Oxido that I just mentioned. These new opportunities, there's a couple. One of them is a hotel project in Charleston that would be the next iteration of Hotel Perle, kind of this rollout of this hotel for groups idea. One of the partners on Hotel Perle found this building that's available. Really, the building owner wants to partner with someone to develop it, less so sell it. So right now, the stage it's at is just getting that partner bought in, and then there's all the work of like creating the concept, figuring out the game plan, who's operating it, who's developing it, etc. But it's early innings, and getting in early innings is important. I'll tell you what I'm doing there. And then the other 2 are much smaller and frankly just distractions. There is a hotel in Mississippi across the Lake Pontchartrain from New Orleans that one of the other partners on Hotel Perle has identified. It's an economy inn, and essentially the play there is to purchase it, it's about $1 million, and then renovate the units and then run it more efficiently, run it like a short-term rental, cater to people in New Orleans who go to this area. It's called Bay St. Louis. It's kind of like a little mini getaway, almost like a lake town, like where I grew up in the Midwest. I think there's potential there, but as I look at all that I have going on, it's by far the smallest project. And one of the things I'm thinking about is building Human Capital's portfolio and whether that development is something that I would want in it. Not that it's a bad development, but just priorities, right? And does it match the story of the rest of the projects I'm doing? Unique concept, nature, boutique? No, not as much. It's a short-term rental, rehab and renovation. But there's probably a fee role there for me, either on concept, creative, project management. and revenue is important. So it's something that I'm thinking about. And then the other opportunity is really far less developed, but essentially a contact of mine and the partners here, primarily the local New Orleans developers, has a piece of land under contract in Mississippi where he's really trying to do a similar concept to Oxido. I haven't even discussed this with him. It seems there would probably be a role there, similar to the Bay St. Louis property. It could be more financial, project management, kind of the technical side, or probably or the creative and creative direction side. This, again, I'm thinking about from a revenue standpoint, but also, weighing the prioritization needs with that. Both the Mississippi small STR rehab and this project that I just mentioned, the piece of land, there's probably also an equity opportunity there. Essentially, what I would have to do is put together a pitch selling Human Capital services and outline a scope. And Human Capital is so young, like the interior designers we worked with on Perle, this is all they do. They do it all the time. So they come together with their standard kind of offering. Human Capital is so young, and what we're trying to do is so multifaceted. Really, the way Human Capital started, I studied creative writing in college, then I got into finance. And that has really colored my career because I've tried to keep both sides of the business up, where we touch underwriting and project management and the analytical and technical, like I said, on Hotel Perle, while at the same time we're touching creative direction, branding, design, and all of that. And human is humanities, liberal arts, which is what I studied, became the human, and then capital, obviously finance, that's human capital. The other reason for human capital was just because on the consulting, which I'll get to, I recognize that a lot of small investment firms need human capital. Those are the services I provide over there. So it's kind of this dual meaning. But what's important about that, because we're young, because we're trying to develop and grow two really facets of a business, it's not that easy to even spin up a pitch and a scope of work and a proposal for what we do, what we would like to do and deliver on a project. The easiest way I can put it is pretty much just like everything. Just bring it through front to back. And that's almost worse because if you can't scope down and let's say come in on the Bay St. Louis property and just handle creative direction and branding, it really starts to draw resources away from other things. Not to mention, I haven't even gotten to the consulting, which I'll get to. So part of the reason why I wanted to make this video was just to talk about, this is something that's on my mind every day, just strategizing okay, what do I want Human Capital to become? How do we get there? How do I strategize and prioritize? And that's probably the most difficult part of all of this, is just allocating time, resources, effort, seeing around the next corner. I haven't mentioned much about the Charleston property, but part of the reason that that's on my mind and I am getting involved in that, I'm making a deal page right now for this initial pitch to the building owner. I saw Sedona kind of develop about 6 to 8 months of how it developed. So I was pretty aware of how the partnership was developing, how these problems that eventually arose were coming out. I've been pretty good about seeing, around the next corner and what I need to be doing. An example being partnering or getting involved with the Boulders, the family office that's also involved in Sedona, understanding the importance of that link and just building that relationship. I was much younger at the time, but I had this sense for that. And I'm having this same sense now with Charleston, where, like I said, early innings, if you're not involved, especially as a younger firm, when you think about development and the partnership and the general partners, there's a lot of value that needs to be delivered. You need to just get the plan together, get the concept together, get the funding together, coordinate everything, right? And if there's a partnership that can do that without you, how do you get into that partnership? And it just comes down to delivering value. And if you're not delivering value, it gets away from you very quickly. You'll get left behind, essentially. So my thought with that is just trying to stay involved, stay valuable. It's also it's a concept I believe in, the group hotels. It's the level of product and project that I want to be working on, that I want to have in my portfolio. And it's in a market that I really love. I love Charleston. I grew up going there. So I'm balancing all of that right now. I'll get to team and how that comes in a second. Moving on, this will be much shorter. Consulting. The vision with Human Capital has always been to power and fund the business with a consulting kind of operating arm. All real estate developers need to have some sort of operating business because the way you get paid on all this is fees at milestones or profit shares essentially with the GP promote. And those things can be years apart. And that's not conducive to running and growing a business and retaining a team. Most real estate developers do project management, property management, brokerage. I kind of came up under this firm that has done this, and I wanted to do it differently for a couple of reasons, namely location independence. All those three traditional real estate development firm services I mentioned are pretty kind of tied down, geolocated. I wanted to do something that allowed a little bit more freedom. And then I also think there are businesses, if you're chasing freedom, doing something tech and internet makes the most sense. And within the tech and internet business space and service space, there's a lot of opportunities for much higher margins than these traditional businesses. So that's the other component of it, looking for things that can generate high cash relative to effort. And as I've kind of come up through and out of college and just started this journey, I've always paid attention to these people who are on the internet, whether through agencies or, micro SaaS, so software solutions for like really targeted niches or e-commerce or whatever, people able to generate kind of absurd cash to effort because of the scale of the internet. And I think people haven't even yet really grasped that. You really have to understand how that's possible. And what I've boiled it down to is the reach of the internet allows you to create much more simple and focused businesses that are easier and cheaper to run, smaller team, less cost, etc. And the reason those businesses can work like they never worked in the past is because the internet allows you to so hyper target the specific niche and people that need that solution, and it makes the world your market. So if there's not enough people in your niche for that solution in your town, your region, your country, you can now go global. And there are plenty of niches that you've never even heard of or thought of that can support really big businesses. An example that I always point to, I'll do it quickly because it's not directly related to real estate. There's a guy, Peter Levels. He's fairly famous within the internet entrepreneur sphere. And he essentially has created a portfolio of websites, I wouldn't even call them softwares, that generate a lot of cash. At one point last year, he was up to about $3.6 million a year in cash. He's got one part-time employee. So profit margins are 80% or above even when you factor in tech and servers and all that. He is a self-taught programmer. He's called an indie hacker, an indiepreneur. That's what people in this space kind of call themselves. And he's certainly an outlier. But what he's done is created these businesses like a website that is essentially a social media for travelers, where if you're traveling to a place, you put that place in and then you can get access to this crowdsourced data about the place, about where to go, where not to go, etc. There's also a community component to it, just hosted in a Slack channel. He has Remote OK, which is a remote work job board. And he has a couple AI tools now that he's developed totally himself, just writing the code from scratch. He's a self-taught programmer, never studied it. When I came across him, this was along my journey after I've read things like the 4-Hour Work Week that talked about this same thing, but more with e-commerce. I just started to think about why no one from like a, let's call it white collar traditional industry was paying attention to this or doing it, and why the people who were doing this, whether indiepreneur, indie hackers, or like who often build an audience and launch a business, a small niche business to it, why none of them were taking that into this more traditional white collar space. And I just had this sense that if you could figure that out and you could generate a high amount of cash flow to effort, rather than spending your time traveling the world or just spending all your time doing that, you can do some of that, take that time, that effort, and then take those resources, that capital, and pour it into real estate. That's where this kind of dual track vision came from. It started from, originally it was just like plain old PowerPoint pitch decks and financial models. What I did in order to make it possible to niche down to scale is kind of sub-brand both those services, financial modeling and pitch decks. AirCalc is Airbnb data and financial modeling for short-term rental investors. Dealpage is a pitch deck service with a unique kind of technical component to it. I'll first touch on AirCalc. AirCalc is something I've been doing for myself. I kind of developed a way to scrape data I developed a way to scrape data from Airbnb, which I would then use, like when I was working with this developer here, to underwrite and vet Airbnb deals. Along the way, people kind of in my network started coming to me asking for these data reports. I kind of named it. I was just selling these reports like one-off, just in these PDF packages for a while, like over a year. And then at the beginning of this year, when I really made a concentrated push to kind of create this vertical of human capital, I branded it, I put up a website, and I prioritized AirCalc ahead of Dealpage. Dealpage, essentially, I've always been creating pitch decks, like I mentioned. About a year ago, I created the pitch deck for Hotel Perle. It was a grueling process. It took weeks and weeks, and the end product was good. It obviously worked. We closed the raise, but I was just shocked how difficult it was and how standard and static and stale I felt the end product was. And at that time, I was getting more and more into guys like Peter Levels and the internet, and I knew tech, there was something more that was possible, and I knew that I could teach myself how to do it. So one day, literally in the shower, about September, October of last year, I had the idea for Dealpage. I was preparing to create the Oxido deck, and it just came to mind, why don't I just do this like a web page? And it would allow me to embed video, to do interactive tools like maps and calculators, sliders, animations, like a whole host of other features just to make it more engaging, more compressed and concise, better organization of information, easier to share, a whole host of benefits. And I thought about it initially, Dealpage becoming like a SaaS potentially, where you can people would self-service, create their own by filling out forms and drag and drop. It's very complex to build something like that. So really what I've rolled it out as is like an agency service. AirCalc and Dealpage were both developing at the same time, starting kind of fall last year. I mentioned some partnership difficulties on Oxido. I knew it was going to be a while until I got my next fee from Oxido. I still haven't gotten it. So I knew I had to get that operating business cash flow going. And that was very difficult to develop kind of two ideas at once. I didn't even really realize what I was doing. And when it came time to launch these two in about March of this year, they were both sort of ready. I decided to go with AirCalc first. My thought with that was AirCalc's lower ticket. It's like a couple $100 compared to several thousand for Dealpage. It would be easier to sell, easier to get momentum, kind of learn from that, get some cash flow in the door, and then really push Dealpage. Not only is it very difficult, I'd say impossible to run both of these both that quickly. It never would have been that simple. And so that was a mistake I made, was thinking that and choosing AirCalc as the one to kind of stagger first, because Dealpage, right off the bat, I made the Oxido deck with Dealpage. The response was so strong, and unlike AirCalc, which really took a lot of explaining just to tell people what it was and what the value was, people with Dealpage, it's so visual, you can just see it. And it has this network effect component to it, where if you make a deal page for someone and they use it as their pitch deck to go raise money, obviously they're sending the Dealpage link around. Everyone else is going to see Dealpage every time it gets sent around, and people are going to go back to the main site, dealpage.io. I knew that. I just thought because of the price point, whatever, it would be smarter to do that second. Well, come now, and really about a month and a half ago, I've pretty much, AirCalc is no longer a focus. Dealpage, the demand and just desire and affinity for the product and service is so much higher. All focus is going to Dealpage. So Human Capital is, Dealpage is our service. We're using that to help fund the business, developing hotels. One day help fund the development of the hotels. Where Dealpage is at right now, it's also at a crossroads. I've been making pitch decks for people. I've sold 6 to 10 of them, and there's a few underway right now. The price point is anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, And I'm really trying to refine the process, which is I'm learning very difficult. Any sort of bespoke service is very difficult. And refining the process in the sense of like onboarding clients, getting the information needed, driving through to delivery. As I've been doing that, there's been demand from B2B companies who are selling services or products to businesses who usually use PDF sales decks. And I've had a few come to me asking me to create their sales decks. One of them asked me to add on some technology that would allow them to customize their sales decks. This was earlier this spring. At the time, I saw it and knew it was a distraction, but I was thinking, number one, revenue, needed it. Number two, it would just get me in better and hone my tech skills to develop that, and it did. Where we're at now, the client that wanted that from the beginning wanted to invest in Dealpage and partner and roll that out because they're a sales agency and could sell that to the companies that they are essentially selling their sales rep, fractional rep services to. So the partnership made sense. If they could help fuel the growth of Dealpage and own a part of it, have a good exit and outcome. I explained to them I want Dealpage to truly be a part of Humn Capital. So we agreed to a rev share. Any clients they come in with this page creation software and sell the deck creation service and the page software, they would get a cut of. And I told them if it were to go well, maybe there's a play where you kind of carve out sales page separately, you staff that up, and it becomes like a separate partnership between the two of us. We are right on the cusp of them going out with it, kind of going live with it, using it in their processes. So part of what's been taking my bandwidth over recent weeks has just been formalizing and finalizing that rev share partnership. And I have recognized that that is a departure from everything else that's going on, right? Not only the hotels, but the rest of Dealpage is more hotel adjacent, the real estate pitch decks. Not only is there more of a concept or context shift anytime I need to transition over to working on the B2B component of Dealpage. I had a mentor of mine a couple years ago just tell me something that I believe, that the story, your company's story really matters. And if you have something that kind of breaks the story, it can be really detrimental. You might think that being so multifaceted and having Dealpage B2B and pitch decks and hotels is good when a client or an investor or a partner is trying to understand you, trying to vet you. If they can't understand and you're all over the place, it makes you look scattered, and it makes it hard for them to really gauge you and accept you and potentially partner with you or invest in you. And I really believe that. So I'm trying to be very cognizant about not only the outward story I portray to others, but like I said, keeping my vision and focus aligned within one context of real estate development and all the kind of other benefits that come out of keeping that focus. Like if I'm creating Dealpage pitch decks for real estate development firms, every client could potentially be a partner, could potentially be an investor. All their investors could potentially be investors of mine. If I'm making 50, 100, 1,000 of these a year, the network effect of that just for Humn Capital, myself, and my projects is massive. B2B doesn't have that. But what B2B has is immediate demand, a bigger market, and a subscription component. That page creation technology is a subscription month after month after paying an initial page design and implementation fee, the agency service up front. The pitch decks doesn't have a subscription component to it, and if it did, you're usually only raising capital for a couple of months, so it's not as sticky. There's a lot of positives to the B2B side, but I really spent a couple of weeks debating this, and I know I cannot put my focus there long term or even near term. If it's going to move forward, it has to become independent very quickly. That is where team comes in. I'll move to that in just a second, but just to wrap up here, Dealpage, with the team component, I'm finding a way to kind of create an off-ramp for the B2B side while retaining some value from it. On the pitch deck front, essentially I am slowing down on my marketing efforts in order to develop the product. One thing that I've realized as I've created decks for people over the past couple of months since launching not only with the process issues, which has delayed delivery times and, decreased customer satisfaction. So getting that honed in, but just the product itself. I'm not a trained web designer. I haven't been able to really afford the great web designers, and what we've created, I don't think is the most optimal design, layout, format, function for delivering pitch information. Websites are designed and kind of you expect them to be skimmed. A pitch deck, you do not want to be skimmed. So as I've been developing and designing these based off web design principles and even using web design templates, the end result has not, in my eyes, been optimal. And past that, I mentioned the function of it. The other thing I realized is just having the smooth scroll website, which might seem like a small thing, I think is negative for the experience and the kind of prospect retention as well, because you can kind of just rip through that Dealpage, web page, pitch deck all the way through really quickly. So I spent some time researching and looking into some other options, and am now developing basically a hybrid where it's like a horizontal sliding with some vertical slide web page that has a navigation bar component to it. It functions and feels more like a pitch deck. It chunks information into pieces. It still allows you to embed video and a whole host of other features. But that's the work that's been going in, and that's just been a lot of time and a lot of research and a lot of effort. I have taken my effort away from just selling clients and fulfilling clients to focus on that. I initially thought that I would just kind of do that naturally as I went through client after client in the early days. I realized that that's too much work to do to kind of develop the product as you fulfill for clients. And I wasn't comfortable delivering client work that I knew was kind of like not quite there yet. So I've put a lot of focus there. I'm focusing there. I hired a UX UI consultant to help me there, and have been kind of wrapping up the outstanding Dealpage pitch deck client work that I still have. Where a team comes in, at the beginning of this year, I had one virtual assistant. My February, March of this year, my sister, who's a couple years older than me, her company was going through layoffs. She didn't get laid off, but she decided to kind of take the jump. We had always talked about working together, so she came on to start helping me out kind of in a marketing capacity. I wasn't planning on doing that, but the timing just worked out. I didn't want her to get another job and then either ask her to leave 6 months later or wait for her to stay there for, a year and a half to 2 years. You don't want to just leave jobs right after you get them, in my opinion. So she came on, and I, at the same time, hired another virtual assistant, which I was planning on doing anyways. And up until a month ago, till the beginning of July, that was the team. 2 virtual assistants and my sister. And at the beginning of the July, kind of when I made this shift and downshifted the Dealpage marketing, really started thinking about carving out the sales page component of Dealpage, focusing in, honing in, I just realized that what I was doing was really creating work for the team, for my sister. We weren't even at a place where we could really market, which is what she does. And I was kind of creating initiatives to fill her time because I was so worried about paying and not getting anything back. And it kind of just made us run in circles, and it made me go crazy because coming up with initiatives and kind of delegating, if it's not driving for a specific purpose, it just became far too much on top of everything else I had going on. And the same was true with the second virtual assistant. And I realized I just made a big mistake in hiring and scaling too fast and essentially let go of the virtual assistant. And my sister has been phasing out. She's looking for her next opportunity. We may or may not work together in the future, but I just don't think it's the right time right now. In a very big way, if you've stayed this long in the video, you can tell I have too much going on within this business, and I'm really trying to simplify and streamline as much as humanly possible, and you don't need a big team to do that. So, team has shrunk. I have my virtual assistant still, Nova, she's great. The changes that have happened that I have mentioned and that have to do with Dealpage, with deciding what to do with the B2B component of Dealpage, I thought about trying to sell the technology to the agency partner, I thought about just shutting it down completely. I thought about keeping it as a part of Dealpage. I had the idea to basically try to staff it up, like I mentioned earlier, and separate it out. Someone that I've wanted to try working with for a while, someone who's a little bit younger than me, is an entrepreneur, just wound down her last venture. She went through an accelerator program, is an impressive person, and I saw an opportunity to kind of partner with them specifically on that part of Dealpage. And I'm going to try that as a way to separate it out and hopefully have her as someone I can trust to really spearhead and run that, and partner with the sales agency while they push forward mostly the sales and marketing efforts. I think that it can work. It's taking a little bit of bandwidth now to set that up, but the hope is it can become more autonomous through this girl that I mentioned coming onto the team, and that eventually the effort will go down close to zero and it will stay as a cash flow holding that can help fund human capital. I've even already thought about, though, if that does happen, I don't think that will be a part of human capital's like outward facing brand and story. It will be more like almost like a personal holding of mine. Like I said, I really believe in this idea of story, both for people looking at you and for you understanding yourself and your direction. So those are the things that I'm kind of thinking ahead to and paying attention to. The other component of team, I had someone from TikTok actually reach out to me and basically just asked to work for me for free to start. And there's been a lot of people who've done that, and I just don't answer all of them just because I don't have the time. Something about this person stood out when they messaged me, and then we talked, and that really impressed me and it stood out to me. And I kind of weighed the benefit of, like I said, there's a cost even when the labor is free, there's a cost still to plan and delegate. Different than earlier this year, I identified a specific area where I actually needed help in the short term, which is content. And it's not making up a role. It is a needed role in a part of the business that is a priority right now. When I made this big shift at the beginning of July, I essentially narrowed down the priorities to fulfillment. So kind of closing out the outstanding Dealpage orders, product development of Dealpage, like I mentioned, and then content. So kind of building up my content base, my audience, which is about 15,000 on TikTok right now. Even though we're not pushing Dealpage actively, building it up so that when we are, obviously there's a bit bigger audience to push to. So not push, but have following the journey, potentially people who need that service are in there. So the way he's helping me is essentially like researching ideas, coming up with ideas. I thought it'd be valuable to have someone who is an audience member coming up with the ideas of what I should talk about. So that's where the team is at right now. My sister is kind of operating on the side. She's still doing some marketing things for me, just kind of setting up infrastructure and forms, etc. My assistant kind of helps me day to day. The two team members, the intern is working for free and working on content specifically. The girl that is coming on for the sales B2B side of Dealpage, we just started the other day, but essentially the idea is a revenue split for compensation. Just because I can't support a staff member at this time in that line of the business, and keeping it lean and focused, like I said. So that is the state of human capital right now. And I'll be putting out more videos kind of going a little bit more into detail on these individual components. So like this kind of shift in focus, Dealpage's product development, each of the hotels. And I'm going to try to start doing more on YouTube specifically just because I enjoy this longer format much more. So I appreciate you watching. I'm going to try to do one of the State of the Human every month. Hope you enjoyed it.